and welcome to the Collective Reset podcast, where we gather to talk about our passions, self-care, life, and just how we're all handling this collective worldwide reset, the pandemic. So can you please share your name and where you are calling in from?
My name is Katia Beeden. I am calling in from the beautiful city of Cape Town in South Africa.
Which I'm so excited that that's where you are. I was explaining to you before we started that my husband and I are planning on going to South Africa after this trip around the US. And I'm just so thrilled to learn everything I can. So first, I want you to tell me about those flowers, or us about those flowers, because you were just talking about them and I think they're gorgeous.
Well, I'm currently living in Cape Town in South Africa, and we have the most beautiful hiking trails and mountains all around the city. That's what makes the city so beautiful and unique, is we've got this gorgeous ocean and these gorgeous mountains. And on the mountain, we've got our national flower, the South African flower, which is the protea. But there's many different varieties of protea. And we're going into spring right now, and these are from the mountain. I didn't pick them myself, but these are one of the species of our national flower, and this is a real little taste of Africa and of Cape Town and of the beautiful indigenous beauty that is just literally on our doorstep right here.
They're stunning. They're absolutely stunning. How long have you lived in Cape Town?
Well, I was originally born in Zimbabwe, but I've grown up in South Africa. I moved to Cape Town probably about 14 years ago. However, in those 14 years of living in Cape Town, I have spent a lot of time overseas. I've lived in the US, I've been to the UK, I've spent a lot of time in Europe. So I could say I've been here 14 years, but it has been broken up, obviously by living overseas. I'm a global citizen.
What has been your favorite place to live so far, or do you have one?
I tell you where my heart is really stuck at the moment. I had the opportunity to live in New England in North America, and I lived in the middle of the woods, like literally in the woods. And there was just something about that experience, the simplicity of that lifestyle, of being so close to nature. It has changed me. It's made it very difficult for me to actually live in a city. And all my soul longs to do now is live in that kind of nature, to be as close to earth as possible. So that is what I'm striving to get back to somewhere, somehow again.
I love that, because I think that's one of the beautiful things about traveling is, there are many people who aren't able to travel, but for those of us who do have the luxury to be able to do so, I think that when you find yourself in different lands, you realize something about yourself that maybe you didn't know that you wanted, or that your soul was connected to, and that you might think that the place that you've grown up in is where your vibe is, but it could turn out it's something so different, and what lands will call to you and what they bring out of you is just, it's an amazing part about being able to travel and be on the road and be a global citizen.
Yeah.
And in Africa, what are some of your favorite places there?
In terms of Africa, not South Africa, I would say the ultimate country I've ever been to was Botswana. I had the privilege of literally going into the wild, into the Okavango swamp, and literally being in a camp. We flew in and we 4x4'd out, but literally sleeping under the stars. We literally had to have someone on crocodile watch if we wanted to swim in the river, because that's how wild it was. There was hippos. There was even a mamba snake that came through the campsite. I mean, that is the closest, most wildest experience of nature I have ever had, but it was magic. So if you ever have the chance to get to Botswana and get to the Okavango swamps, it is that, what a privilege to have had that experience.
Wow.
South Africa itself is just an incredibly beautiful country, and there is just so much here. I could speak a whole hour just on the places to visit.
Botswana was a wonderful tip.
Yeah, Botswana. And if you don't get to Botswana, but you're in South Africa, you can have that same bush experience because we've got the Kruger National Park and many, many other camps. I mean, I've been to a few of the other camps as well. So, but if you do get that extra wild Botswana experience, then that is really special.
Oh, I'm so excited. First of all, I'm excited to have you on and to share that tip and also to take it and hopefully make it there myself. Um, Tell us right now, so in the US, we're in the midst of a pandemic and a civil rights movement. Um, right now, are you dealing with the pandemic in Cape Town? What's the situation there in terms of, are you in a lockdown at all? Are you allowing travel in?
Well, South Africa we've had a very, very strict lockdown. In fact, I would say we had one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. We were at what we call a level 5 lockdown, then a level 4 lockdown, then a level 3 lockdown, and we're currently in a level 2 lockdown. All right. So where we are now, we still have a curfew. We are not allowed to be out from, I think it's 10 p.m. till 5 a.m.
Hmm.
They've only recently started allowing people to legally buy cigarettes and alcohol. I don't drink or smoke, so that wasn't a problem for me, but I feel very sorry for those who did. We were not allowed to leave our houses as well. We weren't even allowed to exercise. And when we were eventually allowed to exercise, it was only between, I think, 6 and 9 in the morning. So it's been very, very intense. Luckily for me, I have an online business. So I I've just been working right through it in a way, and that saved me because I could just be so busy and just be working. And I managed to get out and walk, but they shut down all the nature walks. So I couldn't get onto the mountain, for example. So where I really felt it for me was not being able to get into nature, not being able to hike. So it's been brutal here.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of issues in America right now, but we've got a lot of unrest and a lot of similar kind of issues coming up here in Africa. And when I look at what's happening on the global platform, I think the whole world's feeling it. I mean, I've got clients literally all over the world, and I speak to clients in Australia, I speak to clients in Saudi Arabia, I speak to clients in the UK, just in America, in Canada. And what I realized through all these conversations is that we're all kind of in the same boat, in the same way and in different ways. I think this pandemic globally has just caused unrest everywhere and has made everyone question everything. And it's been tough. And South Africa is a first world country, but within a third world country. So financially, and the poverty, that's what's breaking my heart. We've all had to really reach out. I mean, I am literally feeding people on my doorstep. So yeah, it's tough times, and we just have to be really strong and stay optimistic and move through it. Yeah.
I think it's why, for me, it was why this podcast began, was the collective reset being this idea of that we were all collectively in this.
Yeah.
And that it is terrifying for so many. It is life disrupting. It is affecting and triggering so many different things and so many people. And that the hope that I hold on to and that I hope that this podcast imparts is that this also can be looked at as a reset, and as a chance for us to figure out our next steps, and to perhaps lead a life after this that feels better than what we were doing before, because it's based on something that feels more authentic. But that being said, it is interesting that no matter where in the world and whom you're talking to, that this is what people are dealing with. I have been, now that we've moved to your work and all of the clients that you do speak with, I've been following you for a very long time on social media, and love what you offer and your work. And so wanted to know what drew you to it. Where did this begin? And first tell us what you do, tell the audience what you do. And then how you were introduced to it or how this began for you.
Okay, so I'm an intuitive life coach. So I basically teach people how to love themselves, especially after narcissistic abuse. So how did I fall into this? Well, a good few years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, my entire life literally fell apart. What I call a tower moment in the tarot, the tower card. Um, I was in my late 30s. I was engaged to be married. I was planning to start a family. Um, and suddenly the rug was pulled out of me when he just suddenly ended our relationship. So in that moment, I lost everything. I lost my home, the future I was planning. I lost my dignity. I lost my chance to become a mother, everything I've been building and working on for 8 years of my life. However, in retrospect, we know that these tower moments happen on purpose, right? I honestly believe that a divine intelligence gives us a nudge and sometimes forces us to make the changes we need to make if we're not making them. Anyways, as my life was crumbling all around me, the thought of going back full time into the advertising industry just felt wrong because I'd been doing a bit of freelance work and kind of working my way out of it. But as the relationship ended, I would obviously need to support myself in a different way and would have to go back full time. And that's the thought of that, I just couldn't do it. I knew I needed to create a different path for myself, but I was not sure what that looked like. Like so many people that come to me and say, what is my purpose? Where do I go from here? I hate what I'm doing. So to answer your question, though, I was not drawn into this work so much. I feel I was guided into it and led into it. So healing starts with the feminine energy. So you connect to your heart, you trust your intuition, and you let it guide you. And step by step by step, you hear the answers, you take the step, and you follow. And that is what I ended up doing. I had this inexplicable, deep desire to go to India. I have no idea where it came from, but it was so strong and so palpable. So I decided, well, that's it. I'm going to India. So I booked a ticket, and within 4 weeks, I had packed my life up in boxes, packed a rucksack, and just flew to Mumbai. I had some money and no real plan. I was just going to get to Mumbai and figure it out from there. And that's what I did. I ended up on this 3-month solo soul searching trip in India. And when I eventually made my way up to Rishikesh in northern India, I booked a session with a healer, a beautiful Indian woman that I met there. And I spent almost a whole day with her. And she said to me, you're going to become a spiritual teacher and teach others how to love themselves. And I looked at her and I was like, what? What is a spiritual teacher? What does that even mean? I mean, I'm in advertising. I'm a copywriter. And anyway, I left the session and it was so interesting. I went home, back to my room, opened up my laptop, and suddenly there was this little folder on my desktop called Esoterics that I had kept for years. I'd always left it on my desktop as my little like hobby folder. Mm-hmm. And in that folder was numerology, astrology, crystal therapy, Reiki, tarot, oracle cards, all the kind of energy healing art stuff that I love and I'm passionate about. And I just started laughing and it suddenly hit me. What I had been looking for all around me had actually been right in front of me the whole time. Mm-hmm. What I thought was just a hobby and a frivolous interest actually was a lot more than that. Mm-hmm. And so the next thing I did was I went and did Reiki 1. I just started there, did Reiki 1. And I started with that in India already. And I just got led to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and took the next step and the next step. So on a practical level, I listened to my intuition and underwent my own healing journey. But then I took actual action, all right? I did online courses. I got the training I needed. I started posting every day on Instagram. I studied, I researched, I set up my website. I did free readings and I gave free Reiki healings. I just immersed myself in this new world, in this new thing. In fact, I just poured everything into it. I sold my car. I cashed in all my policies. I suppose I was a bit irresponsible. It's not the advice I normally give my clients, but I kind of went all in. Yeah. And I prayed and I prayed and I listened and I listened and I just went for it. And I got led, and here I am a few years later, and yeah, and I love what I do. I've found my passion. I've found my purpose.
I think you touched on so many interesting things there. And one being that you listened, right? And I think that's so vital to the journey of when people say, like, well, what do I do now? And how do I find my purpose? And I feel like that is such an important part of it, is to listen to yourself and to give yourself the space to do so, so that you're not being inundated by everyone else's opinions or thoughts of where you should go or who you should be. Um, but also that it's what your own pain that led you into that, or that guided you there. Um, and so you mentioned the Tower card. Is that the card that usually would signify that something big has happened, or that something, what does that card usually mean?
Yeah, so in the tarot, we've got the major arcana, which is 21 cards, and they each card kind of represents a point in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
The Tower card is the 16th card, and it's basically this tower, and it's got this lightning bolt, and these two characters kind of falling out of the windows. It's the card of distraction. Yeah. So when the Tower card represents that moment in life where it's the divorce, it's the breakup, it's the loss of the job, it's the illness, it's the death, it's that life-changing destruction that happens before the rebirth.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's very interesting that whenever I speak with people, that is usually what has happened, right? My life has fallen apart, and so I had no choice but to figure out what to do next. And I think when you often reach that point where you've hit like kind of bottom and you're like, well, shit can't get any worse than this, is you do make kind of braver choices, right? Because you're like, it's already awful. So I might as well lean into what feels good. And if you just keep leaning and leaning and leaning, it's usually what brings you further. I love that when you talk about this work, you say that alchemizing the science together with the woo creates the pathway towards healing. And so I'd love if you can explain just what that means.
Sure. So the science, okay, for me includes psychological theory, all right? I studied psychology at university. It's one of my passions as well. But science also includes advancements in neuroscience, for example, which has neuroscience, which has now discovered, for example, that the gut has its own nervous system, all right? So science has kind of proven it. So your gut kind of knows what's happening in your environment before your five senses do, all right? So in a way, our intuition isn't so woo after all, okay? But I also love researching the latest findings in science and quantum physics, especially when it comes to spirituality and psychology. And when you start kind of doing that, it's amazing what's actually coming out in science and quantum physics at the moment. Quantum physics is now sharing with us that we are all energy, all right? Something the mystics have known for centuries. And from that perspective, energy healing and astrology, for example, are not so out there. They make practical, energetic sense. If the moon can influence the tides, I'm sure she has a pull on us as well, all right? So from a woo point of view, just to use an example, I might find in the Akashic records that you have say a program of, I don't know, isolation, all right? So in other words, I can then tell that this client is isolating themselves, they don't have a lot of relationships, they're pretty lonely, all right? In her book, Molecules of Emotion, by Candace Pert, it's a wonderful book, she talks about how we can literally become addicted to certain emotions in the body, all right? So when we're getting a certain emotion repetitively, all right, our body becomes addicted to it, all right? So if, for example, we're in a narcissistic relationship and our nervous system is on high alert all the time, we kind of get addicted to that kind of energy, all right? Which means when we leave the narcissist, we end that relationship, our nervous system is still looking for that hit, for that high. So we'll want to make contact with that person, for example, even though they're abusive, all right? So back to my client that is got this woo thing that I found, this program of isolation. When I start talking to her, all right, and I find out, yeah, she was in a very abusive relationship. She's trying to heal from that to protect herself. She's isolating. It's so amazing. The science is saying that she was addicted to this emotion, this abusive relationship, all right? But by going into the woo and just uncovering that program of isolation, it opens up a conversation. And by opening up that conversation, we start putting all the pieces together, all right? So it's a matter of putting psychology, spirituality, and then I love having books like Molecules of Emotion in my kind of toolbox. So when I'm having these conversations with a client and we start talking about why it was so hard for her to leave that relationship, I can say, yeah, but if you read this book, it's scientifically proven that this is how you were responding, which was keeping you in that cycle. So don't blame yourself. Don't beat yourself up about it. All right. There's a lot going on. There's a scientific reason why you were addicted to that kind of relationship. And there's a spiritual reason why you were in that kind of dynamic. But let's do the work together. And I just think having all those different points of view, I think gives my clients a more holistic idea of what's happening for them. And that for me is what true holistic healing is really about. So, for example, just to take it in into another sort of dimension here, quantum physics also acknowledges that there is not only one plane of existence, right? There are many, and they exist in this moment. In spiritual terms, we talk about having multidimensional lives or being multidimensional beings, all right? And for true and deep healing to take place, we want to heal and clear on all these different levels, which working in the Akashic records makes possible, which sounds really woo. But when we look at what quantum physics is saying, it kind of makes it not so woo, because quantum physics is also acknowledging these different planes of existence. Another example of the science and the woo is science has discovered through epigenetics, for example, that trauma is passed on from generation to generation to generation. And that's one of the cycles we're also looking to break free of. Energy healing helps make that possible. Right? So from a scientific point of view, we can see and study how that's happened. But from a woo and energy healing point of view, we can actually go in and heal that and dissolve it. And heal that line, heal all the generations before and heal all the generations to come. So I feel that by combining the science, the knowledge, all right, the verification of science together with energy healing principles, I feel we create a truly holistic approach towards healing on all levels. Also, we need scientific thinking to help ground theory into reality. If we're just all in the upper chakras all the time, it's a bit woo-woo, okay? For me, science is kind of the lower chakras, the grounding energy, and we need both for balance, all right? So I always look at it like this. For me, the science is the masculine energy, and the woo is the feminine energy. We put the two together, and I think we've got a nice, grounded, holistic way of looking at healing. Another way I want to just also talk about the science and the woo is, for example, this is woo. We'll be on Instagram and we'll see a meme that says, I don't know, you've got to feel it to heal it, or self-love is the pathway to true love, all right? That all sounds amazing, all right? And that's all in the woo world. But what the heck does that actually mean? What does feel it to heal it mean? To a lot of my clients who've been cut off from their bodies and their feelings, all right, they have no idea how to feel it and heal it. So what is the actual process of feeling my feelings? I like grounded, practical information that I can actually use and apply, and most importantly, get results from. So instead of just having this woo concept of just saying to your client, well, you've got to feel it to heal it, I teach my client how to actually feel their feelings, how to go into their bodies, how to find those emotions, how to dissolve those emotions. Which is why combining the practicality of a scientific approach together with sort of a mystical practice of the healing arts works so well.
Mhm.
I just feel that a very scientific approach to healing lacks something, and a very just woo approach also lacks something. All
Yeah.
right. So together, I just think we have something um, more structured, more real, something that can really bring about practical transformation. And I can actually tell my clients, do this, do this, do this, not just meditate and pray, okay, but also take these steps. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it's why I think I've always appreciated your work so much, is that it's accessible and approachable. Um, as someone who's worked in wellness for so long, there's a certain, there are leaders, healers, teachers that sometimes you come into contact with, and it's like, this is so esoteric that I don't understand how you expect anybody to connect to this. Um, and I think when you it's like what you said, most people have not had the privilege to sit with themselves, with their
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, with their bodies. And so when you say things like feel it to heal it and just breathe your way, to bliss, it's like no one knows what that means. And people need action steps and tangible things to be able to do, to connect to themselves and then to move forward. So I love that. Now, you touched on the Akashic records. And so I'd love if you can explain what those are and why someone would want to have their Akashic records read.
All right, so now we're going to dip deeply into the woo, okay?
Yes.
um, So the Akashic records are basically an energetic database that holds all the information about your soul across different lifetimes, all right? So it holds information about the choices you've made and the karma they've generated. I always look at it like this. Most of us have an album that our parents perhaps put together of all our photos from when we were little to where we are now. And I look at the Akashic records, it's that album, but it expands over lifetimes. Now, who can access the Akashic records? Well, in truth, every single human being has access to the Akashic records. We are all intuitive beings, all right? Um, Unfortunately, a lot of us as humans have forgotten who we are. That intuitive part of ourselves has been shut down, especially under a very patriarchal society that is denied the divine feminine, because the feminine energy is that intuitive, feeling, knowing energy. But when we access that feminine, intuitive aspect of ourselves, then we are able to access the Akashic records. Now, I've been trained how to do this, and I've been attuned to it. So, but I just want everyone to know it's not really such a weird process. It's actually just an intuitive thing you do. It's very simple to do. But once we go into the Akashic records, the work that I do is, on the one hand, it's woo, but on the other hand, it is very grounded work. There are very strict protocols in how we do this work. So if I'm doing an Akashic reading for someone, it's very specific. There are very specific questions that I ask. There are very specific things that I look for. These are the protocols. And in doing that, I get very specific information.
Hmm.
Because, like my teacher, Andrea Hess, always says, information is just information. If information doesn't lead to transformation, it has no purpose. All right. So we don't just go into the Akashic records just to look up all sorts of information. All right. There needs to be a practical reason why we're looking at that information. So the things that I'm looking for in the Akashic records is, ultimately, I want to know what negative thought patterns they have, what programs they have, what's draining their energy. Are there toxic relationships? Are there influences in their environment that are distracting them? There is a multitude of things that I look for. Once I've done their report and I found all these things, then I meet up with them online and we discuss everything that I have found. What this reading then gives them is it gives them a very, very deep look and overview of who they are at soul level, and then what blocks and restrictions are kind of holding them back from manifesting abundance in the areas in their love life, in their work life, or whatever area of life they're looking at. So, for example, Most of us are taught to, I don't know, go to university, get a degree, get a job, off you go. I cannot tell you how many of my clients are in jobs that they hate their jobs, right? But they got the right degree and they're getting the right salary and they're getting the medical benefits. So they soldier on. But they're so unhappy. And when we go into the Akashic records and see who they are at soul level, you can see that, well, yeah, that's out of alignment. And having that knowledge about themselves, it's like an awakening. They go, they get it. It empowers them to look at themselves differently, and it empowers them to perhaps make new choices more in alignment with who they really are. And when we look at all the blocks and restrictions that come up, and now I'm going to go into the woo, I'll share with you what I look for. I look for negative thought patterns, attaching souls, earthbound souls, what we call compassionate connections, which are basically, I don't know, energy vampire relationships. We look for hooks, we look for cords, we look for contracts. There can be soulmate contracts, contracts of protection, contracts of healing. Any contracts in the Akashic records are generally negative. We look if there's vows from other lifetimes or present life. We look if there's negative beliefs. What illusions is the client buying into? We look for imprints. Sometimes when something very traumatic has happened to us, it leaves an imprint, which changes our behavior, which can create blocks. We look at different types of negative karma. We look if there's constraints or bargains or viruses or any emotional and mental misalignments. I look for chakra imbalances. I can also determine if there are environmental factors. All right, so if an environmental factor comes up in the Akashic records, I check, is that something the client's eating? Is it a place that they're visiting? Is it an object in their environment? And we find out what that is. So it is an incredibly in-depth reading, which gives a holistic, integrated, in-depth look at their emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental blocks. And the point or the goal of going into the Akashic records and finding this information is to help them see where they can make new choices and create positive change. And they find it such a relief to know that a lot of the times this is not just how it is, okay? It's actually just a negative pattern that can be released. So I hope that explains it, and I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. I think it's incredible. It makes me immediately want to hang up and book an appointment with you. I just think it's, it is, though some people might say it's very woo, it is like so interesting to think that there are reasons for this. It's not just how it is. And then the power that comes with knowing that I can make a change and that I can have a different future should I release these ties and allow someone to help me do that. That's incredibly empowering, especially in a moment like this where I think so many people are feeling so uncertain. That what a powerful thing to arm yourself with to figure out how to move forward. When we talk about healing and the kind of healing that you work with your clients on, one of the sentiments that you shared that I find really beautiful, and I'll read it so that I don't get wrong, is when I changed my focus and turned it back toward myself, everything changed. I realized the work of healing involved going inward and healing myself. And so just what that means for you, what that meant for you in terms of what brought you forward and then how you've seen that help other people.
Yeah, that quote of mine comes from a very specific point in my life. When my long-term relationship ended, I spent a long time being really, really angry at my partner. So a lot of my energy was very outward focused on what they did and what they had said and how they had behaved and how wrong they were and how awful they were. And I just suddenly had an epiphany one day. I just had this realization, and I was just like, well, what in me thought that was love? What in me thought it was okay to put up with that for so long? And that is when everything changed. I realized it wasn't about them anymore at all. it was all about what was happening inside of me that had allowed them into the room in the first place. And what in me had so easily just opened the door and let them stay. So I realized that I actually didn't love and respect myself at all. Because if I had truly loved and respected myself, I would have ended that relationship on the third date. Or in other examples, in some of my other relationships, I would not have given that person the status of best friend. I had been assigning roles to the people in my life that they did not actually fulfill. So the man that I thought loved me and would be the father of my children was actually just using me. He wasn't those things at all. The person that I thought was my best friend actually just treated me like an acquaintance and milked me for my resources. And the more neglectful or abusive someone became, the more compliant I became. So I would desperately try and be nice, or desperately try to do more for them to make them love me, almost like, don't hurt me, love me. But the painful truth was a narcissistic person. That was an abusive person. That person was just using you. But because I didn't love and respect myself, and I was so needy and desperate for love, I was not facing and seeing reality. And that is what I had to heal up. I had to understand where those patterns came from. Why was I so codependent? Basically, that's what I realized. I am codependent. And that is where my work, I had to heal that up. Because if I didn't heal that up, I was going to keep finding myself in codependent relationship after codependent relationship after codependent relationship. And so many people say, well, what is codependency? Well, at its core, codependency is a lack of self-love. We need external validation from other people to feel okay, which means even if someone isn't treating us nice, we'll do everything just to make them treat us nice, because our love tank on the inside is empty. So I had to fill up my own love tank, because when we love ourselves and respect ourselves, we put ourselves in nice jobs. We put ourselves in nice relationship. We choose people that love us. We make very, very different choices when we love ourselves. When we don't love ourselves and we're letting the inner critic run the show, well, life doesn't feel so good. And unfortunately, if you've grown up in childhood where love felt like pain, you don't even know that it doesn't feel like good, that it doesn't feel good. You just think pain is love. It feels familiar. It feels normal. So that epiphany, that going within, was really about cleaning up what in me was putting myself into these situations. And I had to take responsibility for that at the end of the day. That's where my work lay.
And I think that is the hardest part for most people, is if you're looking to make a change, then it's probably because you're not feeling good about where you are. And unfortunately, to get to where you want to be, you have to do the self-work that doesn't feel very good. And so people avoid it. But it's true, like, you will keep putting yourself in those situations if you don't heal the foundation of it, which is your respect and love for yourself. And then it just makes you make better choices. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a woo perspective, basically, I was a vibrational match for pain. When you've got that wound on the inside, that is your energy, that is your vibration, which means wherever you go, you're going to be a vibrational match to pain or to abuse or to neglect. So you've got to go in and heal that, because when you change that frequency, when you change that vibration inside of you, suddenly the whole world isn't reflecting that back at you. Suddenly you can actually meet love. You can meet true friendship. You can find joy. And that's where a lot of people get stuck. They say, oh, well, and everyone's horrible. All men are terrible, because they haven't healed up what's inside of them. So they keep meeting all the terrible men or the awful people because we haven't done the work inside. And I see with some of my clients on the self-love journey coaching program I do, it's interesting, the class that they find the most confronting often is when we do the work on the inner critic. And they suddenly realize how they've been talking to themselves. And it can be very confronting. when they realize that's actually the voice that they've been listening to and following. And that voice doesn't put us in very nice places and spaces.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. I love it. I hope, as I said, I've been following your work for a long time. I'm hoping to work with you soon. And this has just been such a joy, excuse me, listening to you. I hope that everyone comes and finds you and your work. I'm wondering if you have, as an intuitive life coach, if you have any parting words in this collective time of such loss and uncertainty and fear, for our audience.
I do. The work that I'm doing a lot of at the moment is feeling our feelings. There is fear, there is worry, there is heartbreak, there is pain, there is grief. Those are big emotions. But the only way for us to heal and get to the other side is to move through them. We've got to move through the grief, through the pain, through the rage, through the anger. We can't leapfrog over it. We can't try and quickly get to a high vibrational feeling of joy. So how do we move through it? Through our bodies. When we're feeling lonely, or we're feeling sad, or we're feeling angry, my guidance is to sit with your body. Find the anger in your body. Feel it. Scream if you need to into a pillow. If you're feeling sad, allow yourself to feel the grief. Notice, just be curious. Notice what grief feels like in your body. Cry. Meet that grief. When you're feeling anxious, most people want to run away from anxiety and smoke a joint or drink a bottle of wine or take a pill. But if you meet that emotion and allow yourself to feel safe in your body, feeling that emotion, feeling that pain, it dissolves, it heals, it lifts. And I think as a collective, none of us were really taught how to feel our feelings. And I think that's a big missing piece for many of us. People don't know how to sit with themselves. That's why they're always busy or doing things. And if we can just learn to do that, it just bring that point of stillness and just honor our bodies and what's going on in our bodies, I think the world would be a very different space if more of us did that and just stopped.
Thank you so much. Can you share with our audience where they can find you and where they can find you online or on social media? All of your handles, please.
All right. Well, my second home is Instagram, and I am at Katia Beeden. And my website is angellovehub.com, 1L. I'm also on Facebook, my same name, Katia Beeden. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You can also just hit the email button on my Instagram, on my website. Yeah.
Thank you. And please, audience, find her. She is wonderful. This was so educational, and I feel just good about, I think it's amazing to sit and speak with people who have turned pain into purpose and who are using that to help move others through their own levels, onions of healing. And so it's just a joy to sit and talk with you. And I just thank you so much for taking the time to speak with our audience. Again, this is Katia Beeden. And thank you for sitting with the Collective Reset podcast. And everyone just have a lovely, lovely day or evening. And Katia, we will speak soon.
Big love. Bye.
Big love. Bye.